I just decided that Ferdinand and Hubert would just actually kiss, and that's the new ending right there.
Hi, welcome to Author's Note.
Don't listen!
My name is Cass.
And my name is Tease.
We're coming back from summer vacation.
It's been so long.
It has been so long since we recorded. It's been like, what?
A month?
Pretty much a month now.
Yeah.
Almost exactly a month. Which, wild. Absolutely astounding. Definitely. I do have a thunderstorm rolling in, so if people catch that up, or catch that in the recordings, I don't apologize. You're welcome for your ambiance and wonderful thunder noises, unless that makes you uncomfortable, which I'm sorry. I'm going to do my best to edit them out, but I don't have any guarantees. Before we even talk about some of the stuff we've been watching or reading, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping. We address this in the form of a pinned comment and editing to the show notes for our episode on Hamilton. That episode came out in October of 2020. We received a comment, and we just thought it would be pertinent to address it. The thing with when we record this podcast is that a lot of the times it's conversational, and, well, I mean, it always is conversational, but we're talking about our topics and our research before and after we record, so sometimes we understand what each of us is saying without laying out further detail or nuance, which is a fault on our part that we have to be more aware of. And somebody pointed out that it sounded to them like we were saying that Lin-Manuel Miranda wasn't actually Puerto Rican because he didn't grow up in Puerto Rico. That was by no means our intent. What we were trying to say, though, was that Lin-Manuel Miranda's experiences as a Puerto Rican are going to be different from native Puerto Ricans and their experiences. By no means do we ever want to deny or silence somebody's experience. We just thought that that was something that was pertinent to the topic we were discussing when it came to Lin-Manuel Miranda, Hamilton, how it has sort of blown up and what he has done with the legacy of that show.
And even though this came out in October 2020, Lin-Manuel Miranda is kind of a popular topic right now. So people are going back and listening to episodes. And just because this is an older episode and that episode is almost essentially a year old at this point, it still bears mentioning that, like, we didn't mean it with ill intent at all. So we just wanted to catch everybody up to speed so nobody was like, damn, this doesn't sit right with me type deal. So we want to just make good on that. So
yeah, the thing with this show, right, and like with any podcast, is things are encapsulated in a moment, and it's very difficult for them to evolve past that without revisiting. But, you know, we're sorry. That's a lapse in judgment and in communication on our part, but we want to thank you guys for holding us accountable and calling us out, because that's the way that people learn. So thank you for that, and thank you for sticking with us.
Thanks, guys. I mean, in the past, we've also done this before, too. If something happens, like, and if it feels not right, then say something. You know, we appreciate having a conversation 100%. So thanks, everybody.
Tease, you saw a lot of movies.
I sure did.
There's one I really want you to talk about, though.
The beach turns you old, Caspian. The beach. It's just the beach. The beach turns you old. It was so bad. It was so bad. But besides that, I also saw Pig. Pig was good. I liked Pig. And I saw Green Knight. I liked it. I mean, I know it's not exactly what the original Arthurian legend went, and kind of went with a more open-ended ending than the original legend did. But as someone who likes movies, I liked it, I guess. It wasn't great, but it was good.
Yes, it was really good. I found it really inspiring.
Yeah.
Visually, it was really, really beautiful. I did not see Pig or Old. I probably won't see either. I think the world would be a better place if M. Night Shyamalan could just openly admit that he doesn't like disabled people and move on with it instead of making every film about it.
Yeah, highly recommend not seeing Old if you are sensitive to subjects like that. Check, does the dog die? Because there are definitely a lot of things in that movie that I was like, that is not right.
We saw each other in person for the first time in over a year,
God.
though.
Yeah, we
What a
sure
magical
did.
experience that was. We saw real
delightful.
person fiction live and in the flesh.
Yeah.
I miss that dog.
That was a good dog.
I miss her trying to get inside my mouth constantly. I know that sounds weird, but this dog, she was very sweet, but all she wanted was to lick my face.
She tried so hard. Also, you know what else I did? I played a fun little RPG Maker game with some friends called Space Funeral. That was fun. It is an RPG Maker game from 2010. So it is very 2010. And it is about a little man named Philip, and his sprite is constantly crying, and he's in his pajamas. So instantly, I felt a very strong kinship with him. And he gets kicked out of his house. So it's about him basically saving the world accidentally because he got kicked out of his house for the day. And
wow. His parents tell him to go outside. Yeah,
his mom was like, leave. And he meets up with a little man named Leghorse, and it was fun. I enjoyed it. I kind of was drunk when my friends played it, so I absorbed it, but probably not to the strongest degree that I should have. But it was worth it. It was really good. I enjoyed it a lot.
I can't believe you would talk about alcohol on our PG for Babies podcast.
Wow. Sorry, but alcohol. Fuck. Pussy.
Tease, do you know what we're talking about today?
Wait, you didn't tell me what you watched.
Okay, so I've been watching a lot of Miraculous Ladybug.
Really? There you go.
Yeah, really. So I also saw Green Knight. I really liked it.
Yeah.
But while I was with Mika, I watched a lot of Miraculous. We were supposed to watch the Berserk movies, but we were both having kind of a hard time. And Berserk is maybe not the series you want to engage with when you're having a hard time. Just a bit of personal advice.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of fun advice. Oh, and I also finished reading I'm Thinking of Ending Things, which was not at all what I expected, but was visceral and beautiful and just really wonderful story.
And you read Uzumaki too.
I read Uzumaki too. It's the first Junji Ito creation I've read, and I loved it. It was incredible.
Yeah.
It was wonderful. Do you know what we're talking about today?
Mass Effect? Question mark?
Yeah, we're talking about Mass Effect 3 and its ending and the giant controversy that sprung up around that.
Oh no.
Tease, do you know anything about Mass Effect?
I played the first 30 minutes maybe of the first Mass Effect game, but it expected me A, to read, B, to pay attention, and C, to drive without assistance. So that did not last long.
Those are all things that people just can't do, especially if they're gay.
Yeah, that's me. I know that when the third one came out, a lot of people weren't happy about the ending, and a lot of people were angry about the ending, but I don't know why they were angry about it. So
we're going to get into that today.
There you go. Perfect.
So we've heard Tease's bona fides on Mass Effect. I played all 3 Mass Effect games. I didn't finish the third one until significantly after release, and I didn't engage with the extended cut or the Citadel DLC at all. Not for any particular reason. It was just, I finished the game, and I didn't want to go back to it after the sour ending.
Love that.
I really enjoyed Mass Effect. I wouldn't say I was like part of the fandom, but I did definitely read a lot of fan fiction and like and reblog a lot of fan art when it was around and kicking. I'm more of a Dragon Age person, and I find that people who are fans of BioWare properties are either one or the other. They either really like Dragon Age or they really like Mass Effect, because one's fantasy and one is sci-fi. Let's establish a little bit about what Mass Effect is, because there are people who probably have never played it or blissfully have never even heard of it. Tease, you've played it. You don't get to point at yourself.
I had the trilogy and everything.
Wow.
Yeah,
It's also, we're also kind of talking about it because the Legendary Edition recently came out, which is the remastered version of all 3 games with
wonderful.
the new and improved endings. So.
Oh, Jesus Christ, really? It was... Ooh, I assume we're going to talk about that, but
we're going to talk about it, yeah.
That bad. Okay, yikes.
This is less an episode about fandom drama and more about how fans have, and BioWare and EA have inadvertently changed the landscape for creator and fan interaction in really, I think, negative ways. But, it's a little bit more complicated than that.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
Mass Effect is a science fiction third-person shooter RPG that was developed by BioWare, and it was initially released on November 20th, 2007.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mass Effect actually arose out of BioWare's success creating the Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic game, and that game is incredibly beloved, and it's one of the games that people are constantly asking for new sequels or adaptations for. It is a game that people still to this day talk about.
I do know that I have a few mutuals who are still very into it, but I didn't realize that because of how successful that was, Mass Effect basically sprung out of it. Interesting.
Well, because Mass Effect was BioWare wanting to have their own IP that they had full creative control over. Because they don't have that with Star Wars. You got to run everything by Mr. Lucas himself. So, in Mass Effect, players assume the role of Commander Shepard, and Commander Shepard can be a man or a woman, which was like one of the really exciting things for people about this game. And you lead a variety of missions across space with a crew of humans and aliens. And as our beloved friend of the show, Nika, put it, it's a ragtag group of misfits trying to fight God, and they kind of win. It's like Persona 5, but in space, without the anime. A little bit of that is a dig on Mass Effect, and mostly I think it's a dig on Persona 5, but Nika's a big fan.
A little bit of both.
So,
a little bit of both.
Yeah. Mass Effect, as a franchise and as a game on initial release, really sold itself upon its choose-your-own-adventure style, in which it boasted that every choice you made had far-reaching consequences across the galaxy of this world. Mass Effect, as a title, is a reference to a lot of things within the game, but also about, the potential consequences of your decisions. You have, as a player, Mass Effect. More than this, choices made in the first game would affect outcomes in the second and even the third game. So as this game grew and people knew it was getting a sequel, and they were like, hey, this sequel, it's going to be affected by the choices you made in the first. That was huge to people. I don't know off the top of my head, really, if we had a game that had that kind of effect.
I was going to say, how did that work? Like, was it just the data
it referenced your save data, yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So it would reference your save data on the console or memory card or whatever. Mass Effect sold across all platforms, but most of its sales were on Xbox 360 because that was kind of the console at the time.
Oh, I thought it was mostly for PS3. Interesting.
Well, it was available on PS3, but EA and Microsoft they're big fans of each other.
Yeah.
And so it would reference your current save data. Dragon Age did the same thing, except when Inquisition came out, but that's a whole other topic. So the game also, on top of all of this cause and effect, choose your own adventure, it has what every little gamer loves, and that's romances.
Romance.
Those romances could also change and develop and grow deeper or more complicated across the multiple titles. So romances that you began in the very first game, you could continue throughout the series, unless it's Ashley or Caden, and in the second game, they're like, Shepard, you're being really difficult, and it's like, no, actually it's you, and if you just sit down and fucking talk about this, instead of shooting at me, maybe this wouldn't be a problem. Just saying.
Okay, I'll take your word for it.
You can smooch the aliens, Tease. There
Won't
are
get me to
lesbians
play.
in this game.
I'm aware, but don't ever make me pay attention to a video game. How dare you?
Mass Effect as a franchise received pretty universal acclaim, and the first game has a 91 on Metacritic, the second has a 96, and the third has a 93. So that score only really went up from the first game, which is really cool. For the purposes of this episode, we're not touching Andromeda. Andromeda came out after the third trilogy, and that's a whole other can of worms that we are not talking about today. We will maybe delve into it another time, but that's a little less fandom-y and more game industry snafus. It is also worth noting, before we get into the meat of this, that Mass Effect, like Dragon Age, has its own nuances and happenings within its fandom over various topics. We're not talking about those today. We are talking specifically about the drama that was related to the release of the third game. And drama doesn't feel like a fitting word, because what happened was so much more vile than simply reducing it to drama. So, that third game had been hyped up for a long period of time. I think once you hit the ending of the second game, most people universally agree that the second game feels the most complete, the most final, the most rich in storytelling. The characters are really diverse in their backgrounds and who they are as people. There's a lot of really interesting conflict that happens in the second game, and the ending feels truly epic in a way I think many video games strive for and fail to reach. Okay. But that second game really pushes forth this idea of your actions do have consequences, and the more time you take to make your decisions, the more things are going to happen in that space, and people will be affected and people will die in the story of this game. So for a lot of people, they were expecting those same kind of stakes from the third game.
Let me guess. They didn't.
3 is the epic conclusion, right, to a story which has built in intrigue and depth and calamitous scope in 2 lengthier games before it, and BioWare promised that it would be bigger, grander, and more technically impressive than those before it. And I don't blame them for that, because all of their plans pointed toward that. Mm-hmm. It was the first game in the trilogy as well that actually brought players to Earth in their journey, with their intergalactic war against the Reapers striking Vancouver Bay and spreading rapidly across the country, the continent, the planet. So for a lot of players, finally this is their first glimpse of their own home presented in the game. For a lot of contexts. It's a better entry point for a lot of people, and that it's coming in the third game adds a certain level of dramatics to it, right? It's that things are quite literally, for a player, closer to home. Yeah. And while piecemeal choices throughout the games reflected upon quests with characters, interrelationship struggles, and the tragedy of a lot of deaths that occurred in the third game, where, you know, there's a character who's terminally ill in the second game, who's kind of coming to the end of his life in the third game. There's world-changing consequences for entire species in this game, and the conclusion that Mass Effect 3 brought its players to was they got 3 choices. Oh no. At the end of this game, they got to make 3 choices. Oh no. And those were the endings. I forget how many endings, and I couldn't find the exact number, because unfortunately news articles are now flooded with reviews of Mass Effect Legendary, so it's a little hard to dig out things that were going on in 2012. But they promised more than 3 endings. I know with Dragon Age Inquisition, they promised something like, I think 13 plus endings, and the reality is, like, there's really only, like, 3 when you think about it, but they're packaging it as multiple different endings because of tiny little differences that aren't happening visually, but are happening in text, right?
Yeah, like end cards of Fire Emblem games, or end cards, of like Choose Your Own Adventures.
Exactly. Can you imagine?
Choose Your Own Adventures. That's all it is.
Can you imagine if Fire Emblem 3 Houses told you that there's over 100 different endings, and the reality is, like, no, you can just pair up different characters and read their end cards differently. Players for Mass Effect 3 were promised a variety of endings, and they were given 3, and those 3 were incredibly similar with very little variation.
That sucks.
They offered very little closure to character storylines and arcs that had been built up over the course of 5 real-life years. We're not even going to talk about, like, narratively how long those were built up in the game. They got a weird little cliffhanger that teased whether Shepard, the character they had played as, developed and created a rich character behind, even survived. I don't think your hero always has to live, but I think this game was very weak-kneed for trying to have it all ways and not coming down with any sort of conviction on either side.
But I have a question. So you say 5 years. Does that mean that all 3 games came out within 5 years? Or what?
Mass Effect 3 came out in 2012. And the first Mass Effect came out in 2007, which sounds unheard of today.
That explains it.
These games.
That explains it. Oh my god. I'm getting mad just you telling me about this. Holy shit. Oh my god.
The first Mass Effect game is quite short.
Yeah, it is. I have been told that, yeah.
Yeah, the idea that you would get an entire space epic trilogy within the space of 5 years today sounds a little wild to me, and that's just how part of that is an issue with the way AAA studios have really prioritized realism in games over anything else. And so, they push their... Yeah. Did Mass Effect 3 release 3 games in a shorter cycle than all of Cyberpunk 2077? I mean, they released it in a shorter cycle than Final Fantasy 15 had.
Oh, they sure did.
There are going to be a lot of quotes in this article because I think what is most pertinent is to draw from the people who were actively observing this at the time.
Yeah.
Sparky Clarkson wrote for Kotaku a perfect summation of how futile the choices in Mass Effect 3 seem when the ending looms before you. They wrote, "Did you choose to cure the genophage or do what the Dalatras asked? It doesn't matter. Tuchanka and Surkesh were destroyed. Did you save the Geth or the Quarians? Who cares? The fleet is wrecked and Rannoch has been obliterated. Did you take back Earth as the game's ad campaign promised you would? Not in any meaningful way. The world you fought to save is gone. Was your Shepard a paragon? Too bad, buddy. Now she's the galaxy's worst war criminal. The more the player understands about the Mass Effect universe, the worse the ending seems." And I think that is really the ultimate failure of this game. It's not that your choices didn't mean anything necessarily. It's that you became entrenched in a world that promised so much adventure and exploration and depth. And at the end, they obliterate all of it. And it feels very... It doesn't even feel satisfying. It doesn't feel like something that was meant to happen narratively. It felt rushed.
Isn't that what happened with Star Wars, though, too? Isn't it kind of ironic? Like, I mean, I'm no Star Wars buff, but...
Baby, you know what else that happened with?
Every other fucking series on Earth.
Game of Thrones.
Oh, yeah, definitely with Game of Thrones, too. I mean, this is unfortunately, like, not an uncommon thing that happens, and I get it. Like, you so badly want to succeed as a creator to make these things that people care about and are satisfied in the ending with, but also at the same time, nobody's ever going to be satisfied. So you make these awful decisions that fuck up your whole game or your whole franchise, and it's so frustrating.
Yeah, and what makes Mass Effect 3 special is it was really, as we'll continue to get deeper into it, it was the first real occurrence of this happening and seeing the widespread upset that could just ripple across the internet.
Yeah, definitely.
Luke Winkle wrote for PC Gamer earlier this year, and it is a wonderful article I'd recommend anyone interested in this whole debacle checking out. I'll link it in the show notes. But he writes, "In 2012, I'm not sure if anyone fully understood the degree to which fans could influence the properties they love, especially when faced with a plot choice they didn't agree with. It's incredibly painful to receive feedback from our core fans that the game's endings were not up to their expectations," BioWare co-founder and general manager Ray Muzica said at the time, as the rancor was picking up. "Our first instinct is to defend our work and point to the high ratings offered by critics, but out of respect for our fans, we need to accept the criticism and feedback with humility. It is a revelatory quote and initial proof that for as much as this new generation of game studios dreamt of auteur autonomy, the customer was always right. Convictions be damned." The issue specifically with this game is that BioWare is the creator of Mass Effect and of Dragon Age, but EA, Electronic Arts, is their publisher. And this, I think, was the first time that fans really turned on BioWare in combination with turning on EA. They had never liked EA. Dragon Age 2 was, by most accounts, an abysmal failure, and most of the people blamed EA because the deadline kept getting cut and cut and cut, because you have to remember, at this period of time, BioWare is actively competing against Ubisoft, who's releasing a new Assassin's Creed game like every year, and they're all doing phenomenal. And no other company can keep up. Yeah. Fans were at the release of Mass Effect 3 upon finishing that game immediately outraged. And again, this is really our first glimpse into the internet age of toxic fan attacks, especially those that are pointed at developers. Those are common everyday things now. We've been used to that, unfortunately, since Gamergate. But this was kind of the first massive upheaval and citing of that. So I want to pull some fan responses to a Reddit thread that asked people why they were disappointed and why they were upset.
Commander Paco says, "Everyone said it already, but it really boils down to this. sci-fi turned into science fantasy, and that the choices you made earlier in Mass Effect 3 and the previous 2 games are also non-consequential. I mean, let's be real. The Reaper War is supposed to be a genocide. And so even fighting back successfully means that characters that grew on you / fell in love with, etc., are going to die, which I think people were ready for. The biggest beef was that people's choices throughout the Mass Effect trilogy didn't seem to matter in the end. I supposed with something as grand as Mass Effect, the choices you make were going to be difficult to make work anyhow. So that's why we got pushed into relatively linear choices.
Benjo Kazooie writes, the game throws its established logic out the window and tells you that the Reapers, sentient, galaxy-ending machines of death, are controlled by an AI who appears to you as a snotty kid who proceeds to give you 3 decisions to make about the Reaper solution without acknowledging your past actions.
Hayden Scramble says, I think, and perhaps this is me being a bit of a conspiracy theorist, the game was not completed. I think EA knew how much money it would make and how badly people wanted it. And I think they forced BioWare's hand just before the final stages so they could get it out. Now, as much as that sounds crazy, the extended cut DLC for free fit like a glove and was just handed out so immediately that it made no sense at all that it wasn't rendered into cutscenes and other more expansive stories and included in the original game. It was pushed back numerous times and came out after a shorter time following its predecessor than Mass Effect 2 did to Mass Effect. It needed more time. Point being, I believe the conjuncture over the ending comes from how well the choices were / weren't fleshed out, and that is EA's fault. EA can eat ass!
Fans were really furious. They sent death threats. They did all manner of things. They bombarded BioWare forums. They found developers across Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr to flood their DMs with complaints, to hit them up with emails and talk about how disappointed they were. Fans even filed formal complaints with the Better Business Bureau and the Fair Trade Commission.
Oh my god.
BioWare forum user El Spico at the time filed a false advertising complaint against Electronic Arts, the publisher of the Mass Effect series. So, quote, after reading through the list of promises about the ending of the game they made in their advertising campaign and PR interviews, it was clear that the product we got did not live up to any of those claims. This is not something I was happy to do, but after the terrible ending, that was in no way the product that had been advertised to me, and the lack of any kind of response from BioWare EA to address this, I felt it was one of my only resources. He also called on other fans to join him in filing complaints with the FTC and Better Business Bureau. Those claims legally, obviously, did not hold water. A lot of what fans were pulling from were informal interviews and not necessarily the ad campaigns, and it would be really, really difficult to prove false advertising on this, because BioWare hadn't come out and said, like, you're going to get exactly 83 endings, and you're going to get 112 cutscenes, and all of... No. It sucked. It sucked, but this was not the solution. So fans harassed developers, they created petitions, they screamed and they shouted and they ravaged those internet forums and email inboxes until they got what they wanted. And while I think fans are justified in being disappointed, by no measure does that ever excuse this kind of behavior that rose up in the wake of Mass Effect 3's ending. In a wonderful article titled Another Day, Another Death Threat from Gamers to the People Who Make Video Games, Stephen Totilo wrote, developers from around the world who were interviewed for this story said the same thing. The vile messages they receive calling for their death usually don't have the whiff of real actionable intent to murder. They have nonetheless become common, lubricated by the ease of communicating online, where he or she who is angry about a game finds release in threatening to kill their suddenly least favorite game creators. Oh, it's messed up.
What the
It's
fuck?
disgusting.
Oh my god. Oy. It's not
But this
that
is the
deep. It's
culture
just
now.
a video game, dude. Like, you don't have to...
This is what people think is acceptable now.
It's not. It's not. These are people that exist. It is the same way how you should not harass service staff. You should not be harassing fucking game dev junior number 17 who sits in cubicle 12 because his boss fucking was like, all right, you gotta get this done by Tuesday, 12 o'clock. Yeah. Like, you just... These people exist and they do not control the whole overarching experience of the game. They are just one person. It is a full fucking it's a whole team that oh my god, bro, it's not that deep. It's just a fucking video game.
People, I think, also get this idea that somehow, like, the directors on video games are all powerful and they can make any decision they want, and their publishers can't do anything to stop them. And that's also not the reality. We, unfortunately, live in a system where compromise for profit is the only option a lot of these people have, especially if they're in AAA studios.
And I think a lot of times the publishers are kind of like a boogeyman for you. Like, you could always blame something on the publishers, the developers. Like, I know back in the day when I actually talked to other people on the Opets, there would be like this whole thing that we'd be like, all right, well, it's not the actual team itself making these decisions, but it's Viacom. And like, in reality, yeah, Viacom owns these things, but like, it's the team that does in fact make these decisions. And it's like, we choose a scapegoat because we pick the lesser of two evils to be like, all right, this person is nice or whatever. But like, at the end of the day, like, they essentially kind of work in tandem with each other. Like, we don't...
It's a complicated issue. There's no right or
it's so interwoven. It's two parts. Like, if a braid was two pieces or whatever, you know, it's two pieces of this braid, and together it makes the full rope. Like, you can't not have one without the other in order to give you the finished product. Like,
I think this is especially pertinent to talk about in the wake of the class action lawsuit against Activision and Blizzard. And I have seen a lot of people defend their choice to cross the picket line and purchase and patronize Blizzard and Activision by saying, well, I want to support the people who are making those games. Okay, we're going to stop for a moment, because when you've worked on a game, you've already been paid. You don't... Game developers are not like actors. They don't get residuals from their work on a model that's in a game. That's not how that works. They've already been paid. So you purchasing that game and making it a huge success, unfortunately, in the current climate, doesn't even guarantee those people a job on the next game. They're freelance. They may have already gone to another studio. So telling yourself, I'm helping the devs by buying this skin in Overwatch, that's not the reality of the situation. Those developers specifically asked you, hey, don't play any of these games for one day. And a lot of people had a lot of difficulty with that. And I compel you to sit down and ask yourself why. There are a lot of other video games out there that Activision and Blizzard does not have a part in.
Baby, I have not eaten Lay's potato chips in 3 weeks. Like...
Just while we're on this topic, I think it's also important to note that when you want to engage in a protest of a company or a boycott of a company, you need to look at what the actual employees protesting are asking you to do.
Yes.
Because sometimes it actually is more beneficial to them if you patronize that business en masse because they've walked out that day and they need to prove that the business absolutely needs them. So be aware of that.
Same idea with DoorDash. Yeah.
Exactly. Coming back around to Mass Effect, we need to talk about how BioWare handled this, because it set a really unfortunate precedent. 3 months after the release of Mass Effect 3, an extended cut was released, changing the most contested aspects of the ending. And in February of 2013, a free DLC was announced that released on March 5th, shy 1 day of a year from Mass Effect 3's initial release. The Citadel DLC offered a greater sense of closure. It allowed players to have a party and reminisce with their crewmates, and it felt for many fans like a more fitting ending and a more complete story. Many fans took that as further proof that EA had rushed BioWare into releasing Mass Effect 3 before its completion, leaving out core aspects like this, which might have been cut or pushed aside to meet an ever-encroaching deadline. Because Mass Effect 3's release did get pushed back once or twice, I believe. And so people saw the fact that a whole new DLC was coming out with less than a year, and they were like, wait, this feels like content that should have been in the game for free already and included on launch day. It was just this little flag that a lot of people took notice of. Joshua Rivera, in an article called The Decade in 5 Games, wrote, "The truth is in the design. The spin is in its limits. To a certain extent, yes, you can decide if the Krogan have a future, but you can't not face Sovereign. You have some choices in Mass Effect, just like you have in The Witcher, The Outer Worlds, or any number of games, but you don't have every choice. Mass Effect is a video game's own sword of Damocles finally coming loose, a franchise that emphasized choice so much that when its final act made a decision players did not care for, they chose not only to reject it, but to demand it be changed. The game that existed in fans' heads was more than important than the game that actually got made, setting a pattern that would repeat itself with alarming regularity. It would repeat itself with Bloodstained, Ritual of the Night, with No Man's Sky, with Fallout 76, and every game that had a backlash. We've never really stopped writing about the games fans imagine. And there's truth in that. I think it is a little inhospitable in that fans do have an understanding of limitations, and this just happened to be an incident in which fans, BioWare, and EA set a precedent for what fans could mobilize to force the hands of creators to do. I think fans from the get-go understood, just like we read in that comment above, that people were going to die. They weren't going to be able to save everybody, and they were okay with that. Mm-hmm. But the fact of the matter is that the game said, your choices matter, your choices matter, your choices matter, and at the end it said, you only get one of 3 choices, and all of them nullify all the choices you made thus far. Mm-hmm. And frankly, the same thing kind of happened with Dragon Age Inquisition, where people were promised a lot of endings, and then it all just kind of boiled down to one concrete ending with different title cards that said, hey, Cullen's doing good, or, oh no, Cullen's like a full-on addict of lyrium now and living on the streets. And it's like, it just doesn't finish in a way that feels finished to people. Mm-hmm. Stares at Snyder Cut, because like that, mm-hmm. right, is like, I think what most people can pull to. And I think, unfortunately, there is a domino effect from Mass Effect 3 to the Snyder Cut. And over the weekend I saw release the Ayer cut trending for David Ayer's version of Suicide Squad.
What? Who even gives a shit? Suicide Squad wasn't even good. Oh my god.
I think what frustrates me particularly about Snyder Cut and Suicide Squad, and frankly you could say the same thing of Mass Effect, is like, these aren't the visions of individual artists trying to be seen. Mm-hmm. Particularly with Justice League and with Suicide Squad, you have an individual who is operating within an existing canon under a larger conglomerate that is very invested in how its intellectual property is perceived. There's something concerning, too, about the fact that corporations can own intellectual property to me. I don't know. Something about that seems wrong.
Something like the Snyder Cut or the Ayer cut for Suicide Squad, it's like, you always have a boss to answer to. Your mm-hmm. boss decides if something gets cut. Like, sorry. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've had pieces of writing essentially rewritten completely because an editor decided that they just wanted to do it without my consent, and it exists. It happens all the time. It's not just in movies, and I'm sorry, but because you have a parasocial relationship with these characters, like, you should not have a final say mm-hmm. in the finished product, because you just gotta deal with it sometimes, dude. Like, mm-hmm. I get it. I want the stuff that I care about to be good. I love good food when it comes to media. I really do. But we can't keep demanding something to be mm-hmm. re-released in these ways when that's the finished product. That was decided what was going to come out. We can't keep demanding stuff. We should not have this power. And mm-hmm. executives are so afraid of losing money that they bend over backwards, but they shouldn't. Like,
and the people who get hurt in that are the grunt workers.
Yes. It's like giving a child that is screaming and crying a toy. It's throwing a fit because you'll give it a toy. If you tell it no 3 mm-hmm. times in a row, it'll stop. Mm-hmm. The child will stop. The child will stop. Like, it makes me so mad. Maybe mm-hmm. it's because I'm a little grumpy today because I'm tired. But I'm so annoyed by this entitlement that exists within fan spaces within the past few years. Mm-hmm. And the sacrifice for people who are ultimately getting hurt, and because of it, like,
it's not a mobilization to have a show renewed because you really loved it. This is looking at the thing you got and saying, it's shitty, I don't like it, do it again.
Fix it.
You're a child. You're a fucking grown man in your 50s and you're telling people to fix it. Like, get over it. Fucking read fan fiction like the rest of us. Oh my God.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Is like the more productive thing. It's okay. I feel like the far more productive thing to do in this situation is not, obviously not to harass developers, not to create petitions, but to really sit down and say like, okay, I don't like this aspect of something. I can still enjoy the other parts of it that were good. Yes. And you know what? You can make fan art. You can make fan fiction. You can talk about it with your friends and just acknowledge that like you didn't like that part and theorize what it would have been like if X had happened. What if Y had happened instead? You can create your own endings. It is not productive for people to sit here and just like Tisa's saying, kick and wail and scream until they get what they want because again, the people who are getting hurt are the employees who are forced to do crunch time, vicious turnarounds, put this stuff out for free to appease fans who may never be happy at all.
And now that we've gotten it more than once, people are going to keep asking for it.
I mean, yeah, look at Sonic, the Hedgehog movie.
Just ask for the director's cut, baby. And not like the Snyder's cut. Like, ask for a fucking director's cut and patiently wait until that, like, special Criterion Blu-ray comes out. Like, wait like the rest of us. Like, everything else has happened. I just, please.
There are also polite ways to engage with this kind of thing. To say, like, hey, I was really let down by this release. Instead of going, this game was terrible, you should kill yourself. That's not effective. It's not effective. It's not kind. It doesn't achieve anything except for more of this culture.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I can hold BioWare accountable for buckling under that level of fan backlash. And I could blame EA, but we both understand that the issue is a lot more complicated than that. And EA isn't accountable for the behavior of demanding vitriolic fans. This, as a whole, is an issue of entitlement, of profit greed, and an issue of capitalism as a whole. BioWare has always towed the line between narrative art and blockbuster video game, and it's really hard for those two to marry in a way that isn't messy. I think something like this happening was unfortunately inevitable at one point or the other. If it hadn't been Mass Effect 3, it would have been something else down the line. And I'm sure people listening to this can think of a dozen other examples within their own private fandoms of things like this happening. And I mean, it happens even in fandom spaces where people start to harass fic writers because they didn't like the ending or they didn't like how they wrote or portrayed one or the other thing. The original Alpha Beta Omega fic stopped updating because people got so upset.
Yeah. I literally was saying that the same, like I was mouthing it as soon as you were about to say it. I was like, yeah.
It's the same thing. Like, this isn't an appropriate response. If you don't like something, that's fine. But there is an artist. I don't know the pronunciation of his name off the top of my head. So to spare us, I'm going to avoid saying it, but he is the creator of the really popular Sunstone comic and has worked on a variety of other comics. I believe his name is Stepan, but he said that he realized for every moment he was talking about disliking or hating something, he was taking away time and life from the things that he enjoyed. The things he enjoyed were dying while he sat and talked about the things he hated. And ever since he's taken that into account, he really focuses himself on appreciating the things he does like. And listen, if you're upset by the Mass Effect 3 ending, I get it. I was too. It felt like a really terrible conclusion to a story that felt way bigger. But a bad ending doesn't invalidate all of the good moments. And I think even when we talk about Game of Thrones, where people have said there's no point in going back and rewatching it because the ending knocks everything out in the worst way possible, I don't think that's true. I think if you're more focused on the ending of something than all the moments that lead up to it, you're inherently doing a disservice to the story and the journey of that story. And I'll still rewatch Game of Thrones because I love the costuming. I love some of those actors, and I want to appreciate all that hard work that went into it. But I can just pretend the ending never happened.
I also think just because like a bad ending exists doesn't mean that you can't necessarily enjoy the moments. And then you know at the end of the day, like, I really don't like this aspect. I've heard that this game has a similar aspect towards it. Okay, I won't play it. Like, just It's okay to not like things, and it's okay not to engage with media that you don't like. You don't have to. I think definitely for me this past year, I've really been better about being like, okay, like, why am I wasting my energy on being angry about something that I don't even care about? Like, I don't even like just, I know, like, I love to be a hater. It's fun to be a hater, but it's also, it's exhausting, you know? Like, to be that angry all the time about things online is tiresome and exhausting. And I promise you'll sleep better at night if you learn to focus on the things that you enjoy and surround yourself with the people who want to share and celebrate the things that you care about.
Exactly. Yeah. And you know what? If you want to be angry, that's fine, but channel it into something productive. You really want creators' voices to be heard? Then start, working for and trying to uplift artist unions. Start trying to help the game industry unionize, because God knows they fucking need it.
Promote something that you think is a better alternative.
Exactly, yeah. There are so many independent games that come out all the time that don't receive recognition or viewership. Just go on itch.io, find something, play it. There's so much on there that's for free, and if you enjoy it, let people know about it. If you didn't like it, that's fine, but you don't need to tell people that you hated it. You can be kinder in your dislike of things and in your disappointment of things, and I think that overall leads us to a much healthier relationship with the things we love.
Also, fun fact, but if you leave a mean comment on somebody's work, it still gets engagement points, so it'll still get bumped up. So guess what? More people will see it. Like, if you really don't have anything nice to say, just don't say it at all, and that's more effective, truth be told. Like, oh my God.
The people you don't like on the internet who are constantly blowing up, if you just stopped paying attention to them, would silently disappear into nothingness.
Just mute them, block them. Oh my God. Oh my God. You don't have to play every single AAA game. You don't have to.
Mass Effect 3 ending bad, but Mass Effect good.
I'll take your word for that.
Sad things happened. And it has unfortunately led us to a current day that, we can't roll back the clock. All we can do is move forward. So we just have to try and be better in the future. Yeah. And I'm not saying that as developers of games, but as fans. This was Author's Note. Thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate having you here. If you're interested in our Patreon, we do polls every month to decide an episode topic, and we also have some exclusive bonus content that's only available there. We also have a Ko-fi, that's ko-fi, if you're interested in giving us just a one-time donation. We're Author's Note Pod on both of those platforms, and just listening to the show helps us out. So if you don't want to give, that's okay. Yeah. You're a part of this just by sitting here and listening with us, and we thank you for being here with us. It's really fun to have you. If you want to find any more information about our show or getting in touch with us, you can find that on authorsnotepod.com. My name is Cass, and you can find me pretty much everywhere across the internet at Valhethella. That's VALHETHELLA. Tease, if people want to find you, where can they discover you?
You could discover me on anywhere that's not related to Mass Effect, because I clearly know nothing about this fucking series. But you can find me on Twitter at Vicuñad, which is VICUNAD. You could also find me on the Fresh Podcast Market, which is a real podcast about fake podcasts. If you liked our theme music, that was by James Yaiullo, and you could find him on Bandcamp under James Y. Cass, who did our delightful cover art?
Our cover art is done by the delightful Nyaliest, who you can find on Twitter at Nyaliest. That's NYALLIEST. Until next time, be conscientious of the people around you. Thank the creators whose work you love. Please be sure to get your vaccine and wear masks whenever possible. Please stay safe out there, everybody. Bye.
Bye.